when you got to the studio level, and if they sent you a script that you liked, then it was a given that the picture was getting made, presuming you could cast it and all that. But I mean, these were. I never got offered movies at studios that I said yes to that didn't get made. These days, it's a little different. Basically, everybody's an independent producer, and you have to come to them with the project. Be nice if you had the casting. Be nice if you had the money. Be nice if you had the script and everything already done. And then they will deign to distribute it for you for a weekend to see if it does any good, and if not, they'll dump it. But everybody is now sort of what latter-day Orson Welles was, spending more time begging for money than ever getting to make movies. And so in order to get anything off the ground, you can't just follow one dream. You can't just have one script that you really have to make. You have to have several scripts, and you have to work on all of them equally. I mean, you have to produce now. You can't just direct.
Born in Morristown, New Jersey in 1946, Joe Dante benefited from excellent networking skills and capitalized on his opportunities without compromising his own vision. While still a student in film school at the Philadelphia College of Art, he interned as a trailer editor for the legendary Roger Corman, creating industry connections that allowed him to make his directorial debut at the tender age of 21, co-directing 1976's Hollywood Boulevard. His solo directorial debut was a bit better given a superior script and more experience, and that film, Piranha, spawned several sequels and scared the pants off of teens for years. Not just talented behind the camera, Dante worked with Ron Howard on his directorial debut, Grand Theft Auto, and he used those connections to get a scriptwriting credit on cult classic Rock and Roll High School in 1979, which he also co-directed. Favoring horror with a bit of a comedic bent, which seems like a natural fit for someone like Dante, who revered the Looney Tunes with its madcap mixture of violence and zany hijinks, Dante followed up Piranha with 1981's The Howling, another cult horror classic. His stock in Hollywood rising, Dante was tapped to direct a segment of the Twilight Zone movie in 1983, and there Dante worked with Steven Spielberg. He also didn't decapitate anyone, which means his participation in the film was a rousing success. Spielberg was keen to reunite with Dante for 1984's Gremlins, a cartoonishly violent Christmas film about mischievous monsters that terrorize a small town. 1985's Explorers was a fantastical film where dreams manifested themselves in reality, an apt metaphor for Dante's meteoric rise to prominence. It goes without saying that his films up to this point were very successful financially on top of having lasting appeal, and Explorers appears to have been a bit of an exception, failing to make back its somewhat bloated $25 million budget. His follow-up, 1987's Inner Space, fared better at the box office and got things back on track for Dante, who used this momentum to churn out another monster hit, 1989's The Burbs. Keen to continue replicating his early success, Dante directed his first sequel of his career, 1990's Gremlins 2: The New Batch, which was even less serious than its predecessor. After directing a few episodes of the underrated television show Erie, Indiana, Dante picked an ode to the cinema experience of his childhood, 1993's Matinee. The movie did modestly well, but Dante stuck with television for almost half a decade before coming back with a very ambitious project, 1998's Small Soldiers. His biggest budget film to date, Small Soldiers minted money, and Dante coasted a bit, doing some TV projects before making the movie he waited his whole career to make, 2003's Looney Tunes Back in Action. Attempting to get back to his horror roots, Dante made a very forgettable horror movie, 2009's The Hole. Part of the reason The Hole was a misfire seemed to have been that it lacked the fun and playful edge that are the hallmark of Dante films, and 2014's Burying the X got Dante back on track. Burying the X wasn't good by any means, but it was more fun and more classic Dante. Another hallmark of Dante's career has been taking 5 years off to do television. It's been 5 years and Dante's due. With a mystery project in post-production, we can only speculate about what we're in store for, but few directors have made as many timeless, classic pieces of cinema as Joe Dante.
Multiple genre director Joe Dante is who we're talking about tonight. I'm your host, Jon Dunning, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Jason Alt.
Hey everybody, thanks for coming back.
Usually, in the past, we've gone for more of the, the heavy themes of a Jim Jarmusch or the crazy visuals of someone like Yorgos Lanthimos.
Normally we do a pretentious director,
right,
or a director who is pretentious, or a pretentious director, and I think that's what sets Joe Dante apart from the rest of those filmmakers. He was kind of in like that class in the 1970s with like Spielberg and Scorsese, and everyone's like, yeah, we grew up watching trashy drive-in movies and we want to make stuff that reminds you of that, but also pretend it's art. And he's like, hey, this is about a monster where if you get it wet, it turns into other smaller monsters. That's probably not how he talks, but
right. Yeah. You want to be a cartoonist, right? And it's very evident to the type of films that he would later kind of churn out. He was very inspired by when he was going to the cinema as a child, going to see these, you know, creep show type movies like the original The Thing and all that. It was really what kind of sparked that passion of filmmaking, but it all came from a very comedic place. And I don't think many other filmmakers that we've talked about on this cast before were able to kind of marry those two together so well. You know, we've talked about a lot of genre directors and a lot of genre bending directors.
I mean, he plays with cartoons as a medium, that like the way Jarmusch would use music in his film. His movies are cartoonish, Dante's are. And that means like there's some realism to it, but also there's cartoonish stuff happening. You know, the violence is exaggerated, like in a cartoon. Like when someone holds a stick of dynamite and it like singes their face a little bit and like blows off their eyebrows. You know, the violence is so over the top that it's funny versus just being like horrific. So I think that's why his movies are so much fun, because like even though he really didn't work within the genre of animation, he found other ways to, you know, made a live action plus, you know, cartoon Looney Tunes movie. He made a lot of movies with puppets, you know. I think the fact that he sort of managed to work a medium he really wanted to always work into filmmaking meant that he was successful. I think people that make the kind of movies they would want to see are typically pretty successful.
And the fact that he adds like crazy elements of horror into something like a Toy Soldiers, which is sold as a family film. I remember putting Toy Soldiers on last night with my 6-year-old and my 7-year-old, and they're just like, what is this? Why are their faces...
What is he going to do with that power saw?
Yeah, why are their faces like look like that? Like, this is terrifying. And earlier in the day, I watched Gremlins for the first time, and they were laughing. His films are timeless. I think that anybody generation-wise, as far as a 6-year-old in 2019 to all the way up to myself or my 17-year-old, it's a cure for the common family film because it has those elements of horror to them, but it also makes something like The Howling, which has just as, you know, arguably as great effects and as horrifying as something like American Werewolf in London, that level of terrifying effects. They could also make it kind of accessible because there is a lot of elements of comedy to it as well. So he takes the edge off both of those. Even stuff that he really tried to make terrifying, like Piranha, that is probably his most Roger Corman-esque movie I think he ever made.
Sure.
He's made some money with his films, but in my opinion, he's kind of like the poor man's Spielberg or the rich man's Roger Corman. And I think that he kind of toes the line in between those two, where he has that. He can make like an Explorers that's like that kind of E.T. He has those, you know, that Stand By Me tone to it. The problem with Explorers, it was just so rushed, and he didn't even get to edit the film that he wanted. It was an unfinished film. Going to make you put this in the can a lot faster, and that's why you get this kind of weird, half-feeling finished film, but also has some incredible, unforgettable elements and great creature effects.
Explorers kind of suffered because it didn't really feel like the rest of his movies. You know, it like sandwiched in between Gremlins and Inner Space, which both seem like real Joe Dante movies. It stuck out. And I think it suffered from him not making the movie he wanted to make. Let's talk about the movies he did want to make. We got into a little bit about the fact that, you know, he, you know, loved the Looney Tunes and animation and that kind of stuff. And that sort of informed how he built scenes and how he, you know, told stories. Because he wrote quite a few of these things. He edited quite a few. And it seems like he can just pick his projects. You know, he kind of does TV for 5 years and then makes another movie. Sometimes you wish he wouldn't. Because he'll direct episodes of Hawaii Five-0 and the terrible MacGyver remake no one asked for.
Yeah.
But you know, he'll still crank out a movie every 5 years or so.
I think that the Joe Dante movie, and like you said, the movies that he wants to make aren't the movies that get funded anymore in Hollywood. He was the quintessential like 90s or 80s and 90s filmmaker, where films like The Burbs could make some coin. Now
but The Burbs today would be a Netflix series, and It would go for 3 seasons. It didn't really need to. Like, you know, in 1989, the Santa Clarita Diet would have been a Joe Dante movie.
Sure, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, they would have wrapped that up in 2 hours instead of being like, how do we get 10 hours out of this? Well,
people were still complaining that it was over in like season 3. I'm like, why are you still watching this? This should have been an hour and a half. Yeah. He even says, you know, now it's more about, it's not so much making films. It's begging studios for money, and that's why I think he's had to kind of go back into making these kind of lower budget horror films. He even said like Burying the X wasn't something to hang your hat on, but even that film took forever for like Focus to fund. So it's just like even this quaint little horror film was a pain in the ass to make.
It was a bad Odd Thomas too.
Yeah.
Which I thought was just like a bad Odd Thomas, I guess, right?
Yeah. The collaborations he did, like he had great scores from Jerry Goldsmith, who did most of his films.
Yeah.
You'll know Jerry Goldsmith, also known for Alien, Secret of NIMH, and the Universal Studios opening logo.
That's some great trivia, John. Yeah, I think people watch this because we Google things you didn't even know that you didn't have to.
Yeah, just like Anton Yelchin, you know, wound up in the same graveyard 2 years later. That was heavily featured in Burying the X. Moving on.
Sometimes trivia's sad.
Yeah.
Featured in Joe Dante's 2018 movie segment Nightmare Cinema was the same kind of vehicle that crushed Anton Yelchin against the gate of his...
Yeah. He was great in Green Room. Let's talk about a little bit of the themes, like you said. So, you know, as we stated before, just everything is so cartoonish, even when the source material...
The good movies are cartoonish. Mm-hmm. And I think Piranha was a great jumping off point because, like... Piranha was a Roger Corman movie, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And the fact that he made that and like it was over the top and violent, kind of like a lot of that. They made a lot of that late 70s, early 80s creature feature stuff, which is sort of like, no, it's not them though. It's Skeeter. You know, that was what they made in the late 70s, early 80s. You know, they made the radioactive worms, you know, stuff like that. So that kind of movie. It was a nice transition. He could have made movies like that, and he didn't quite. He kind of did his own thing and made them more funny. And Piranha, like all the sequels, were funny. Yeah. Well, funny enough, Piranha 2, which he had nothing to do with, was James Cameron's first movie. And they basically hired him to do it because he could scuba dive, and they're like, we want someone to shoot the piranhas under the water. So, yeah, James Cameron having success because he liked to be underwater.
How no one knew how prophetic Piranha 2 was going to be, and he'd go on to direct Titanic.
And if you use Piranha kind of to like as a timeline of Hollywood, Piranha didn't seem out of place, right? Piranha was just like, this is the kind of movie that we're making in 1978. Piranha 2 was sort of like, hey, VHS is a thing. What if we just made this movie straight to VHS? Sort of a deal. Like Piranha 2 was just, it was like Jaws 3D, you know, it was just sort of like, yeah, these sequels suck and we know it, you know, we're just sort of milking it. But now Piranha 3D and Piranha 3 Double D, it's just, it's like those, it is like Sharknado type film, right? Like David Hasselhoff in there just doing a cameo to get bit in half or something like that by a piranha. Like, you know, it's that kind of movie. So it's really funny if you just look at the way the Piranha series has progressed. It's sort of been like, this is the kind of movie that gets made at this time, and they'll feel tonally very different because that was the tone of people trying to make a Piranha in the year they made it, if that makes any sense.
And we could say the same thing for the Howling series, because I think the sequels would go on to be kind of quite campy as well. And I think he really... again, I think with Piranha, he really tried to just make a straight horror film and have people take it as seriously as Killer Fish could be taken seriously. But then, you go over to The Howling, and that's when I feel like you got to see he got some chops, right? Like he got to actually put in his own thumbprint on the project, and it turned out great. Like people, and it was the second best werewolf film, right? Like they didn't make a werewolf film since like The Wolfman, and then out of nowhere that year in 1981 they had this American Werewolf in London and the other werewolf movie that no one saw. Even like there was controversy with this one, like Rick Baker left to go do the creature effects, and we got that great iconic scene. But I think that the metamorphosis scene in The Howling, like they had very little money to make this film, and they stretched every dollar to make it look like it was $10.
Working with Alan Arkush early in his career really helped him, because if you look at what Arkush did, he did Hollywood Boulevard with Joe Dante, and he did Rock and Roll High School with Joe Dante, but he also did Death Sport and Caddyshack 2 and Young at Heart. He did movies like that. So like he didn't have quite that many movies in his career, like he did a lot more television than Dante did. But I think if you look at the other kind of stuff Alan Arkush worked on, I think he helped him find his voice, and assisting somebody that was competent and really knew what they were doing. It was just a few years older than him. I think that was a really good marriage between those two early on, and I think that really kind of helped him worry about making the kind of movie he wanted to make versus worry about how it was technically going to get made. I think interning for Roger Corman was the same way for him.
Collaboration would be a huge theme throughout Dante's entire career. He worked with the same actors. We talked about John Waters having a troupe of his own, but I mean, Joe Dante had Richard Ricardo and Dick Miller, Belinda Blasky, and Archie Hahn throughout most of his films, I think, and he would still be using Dick Miller if Dick Miller didn't pass away, unfortunately, this year at 90 years old. Like, he liked the familiarity, and he liked the propriety of working with the same people. And, going from Roger Corman to someone and making friends with someone like Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg was basically his pit bull back in the day, where he was just like, if you want anything to look okay, like I'm not asking for $1 billion to make The Howling, or Gremlins even, he would sick Spielberg, and people would listen because, back then who was touching, 80s Spielberg or even 90s Spielberg. So I think that collaboration was kind of the thing that allowed Dante to make Joe Dante films throughout, because a lot of people of that time, everything felt, if you remember, like everything felt kind of cookie cutter. A lot of the things, like people were making, Mr. Mom, and everything looked similar. You had your outliers like your Tim Burtons, and everything was kind of the same. And then you had your Joe Dante making parts of the Twilight Zone, and making that, like, even his scene, in my opinion, was one of the most memorable scenes, because it lulls you into this false sense of security, and then just out of nowhere you're laughing and are really creeped out at the same time. That kind of reaction he would seek and employ all the time in stuff like Gremlins, and that's what got him the ticket to make arguably one of the most successful horror movies of all time.
Working with John Sayles, who also worked with Spielberg, I think was good, because Sayles wrote Piranha, and he also wrote like Alligator and The Howling, but he wrote an early draft of E.T., and he wrote The Clan of the Cave Bear, and he wrote a draft of Apollo 13. So that's not a ton of movies over like a 30-year period, but still, like, you could see early in his career he was writing the kind of stuff that Dante was making back then, and then later he kind of got a little more Spielbergy. But I think John Sayles' influence was huge, and I think the fact that he was making the kind of movies that John Sayles was writing about helped him get in with Spielberg. And I think working together on Twilight Zone really cemented that.
We talked a lot about Joe Dante's collaborations with successful people like Roger Corman and Steven Spielberg, but you can't really talk about him without his kind of unspoken rivalry as well with John Landis, who was also kind of running a similar trajectory in the 80s and 90s, where he even stole Rick Baker away from The Howling. He went over to work on American Werewolf in London, and they worked together on Amazon Women on the Moon and also the Twilight Zone movie.
If you look at early Landis, where he made Kentucky Fried Movie, which is, just one of those, like, here's a bunch of vignette type things, that was a real throwback sort of a movie. Animal House, Blues Brothers, American Werewolf, it was more of the, like, dick joke comedy type stuff that Landis was doing early, but it was kind of similar to early Dante. They had a sort of similar career trajectory, and I think really the turning point in that rivalry kind of came, obviously, during Twilight Zone, where Landis had the unfortunate accident with the helicopter, which killed Vic Morrow and 2 child actors.
Good evening, everyone. The entertainment industry is mourning the death of one of its best-known character actors tonight. Vic Morrow was killed today as he ran along a hillside during a shooting sequence for his latest movie. The 50-year-old actor was running with 2 small children in his arms. All 3 were killed. It was a freak accident. A helicopter involved in the movie crashed into them. They died instantly.
And it was after that Spielberg didn't really work with Landis again, and he sort of worked with Dante a little bit more. So I kind of feel like having Spielberg's backing really helped Dante a little bit early. And it's not like, Landis never worked again. Landis made his best movies after Twilight Zone, but still, he also made Blues Brothers 2000. So, I feel like... I feel like Dante really benefited from Spielberg sort of picking a winner in that little friendly rivalry.
Yeah, that was kind of one of the first, like, ostracized moments that you kind of really notice from, like, a group of filmmakers, because, like you said, Landis was on his own kind of trajectory, and then it was really mishandled what unfortunately happened on the set of Twilight Zone. So much so that the only thing isn't getting severed to people's heads, but a high profile professional relationship that says a lot. Is that too much?
You did it, you madman. You and me are like Vic Morrow in his head. We are never getting back together. Look, man, that was 83. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Enough time has passed that we can laugh about it now. 9/11 changed everything, including it being okay to make jokes about the Twilight Zone movie. Something out there on the wing.
that tonal shift after Gremlins, after he saw that success, where he was just like, okay, I want to make those more Spielberg-esque movies. Like I said, he tried with Explorers, a good movie, and it turned out to be a really strong cult movie. Again, great creature effect. Like some of those creature effects, like Richard Ricardo in that damn alien suit, was just nuts. It looked like it was a part of a lot bigger movie than it was. And this was River Phoenix and Ethan Hawke's debut too.
Yeah.
So you follow that up with Inner Space and then The Burbs, and then I think that was right in 1989, and right when 1990 hit, that kind of things started shifting again, and they're just like, we tried to bring Gremlins to... He wanted nothing to do with Gremlins 2. And then he tried to put it off. He's like, I have nothing else to say about it. And it turned out to be one of the best hate fucks as far as a movie goes of all time, in my opinion.
Oh, he's like, oh, you want a Gremlins 2? Oh.
I'm going to make
I'll give you a Gremlins 2.
Yeah.
God, that Key and Peele sketch where he was like...
Yeah.
He was like, there are no wrong answers. We're just brainstorming Gremlins. And they had all these dumb ideas for different kinds of Gremlins. He's like, that's in the movie. And then the screen popped up. That was literally in the movie. Because Gremlins 2 was just it was too Joe Dante, maybe. He's sort of like, it was sort of like, oh, this is what you want? Well, I'm going to crank it up to 11. Like in Better Call Saul when he was wearing the really obnoxious suits trying to get fired. This was Joe Dante trying to get fired from Gremlins 2.
Every day, yeah.
And I was like, Well, I was a kid when Gremlins 2 came out.
Mm-hmm.
That was 1990, so I was like, 5 or 6 or 7. So I saw that on VHS, so maybe it was within a year of coming out, and I did not like it. I was sort of like, okay, I think the first one was better. And who was it for if it wasn't for 7-year-old me?
Well, that's the thing. I think that when I saw it, I loved it a lot. I actually saw it before I saw the actual regular Gremlins, and then when I was younger and I watched Gremlins 1, I'm like, this is kind of creepy. Like, this feels like a more straightforward horror film. It has like the bar scene, and it gets very, off the rails Joe Dante esque. Like, some of those scenes are just like laughable. It looks like those old school like Jack Frost like kind of claymation back in the day. It's just horrible, where you see all the gremlins kind of walking into town. It's crazy. That
remembered Gremlins,
right?
Like, if that hadn't been called Gremlins 2, or if he'd made this as the first movie, I don't know, man. I don't think it would have done as well. I think people just really wanted another Gremlins movie. They wanted Phoebe Cates to do a weird monologue about her dead dad out of nowhere.
She did, though.
About in the middle
of in
the middle of a Christmas movie. They're like, oh, I really hope she does a weird monologue.
He not only parodied what was going on, and actually
he parodied Gremlins.
He parodied Gremlins, because he's just like, I want to get away from this. You won't let me, so I'm going to make fun of the thing that you love so much. Phoebe Cates started talking about her horrible traumatic experience on Lincoln Day. There's not a breather in that. It's joke after joke after reference. Everything's self-references, and he even tried to start his own like Joe Dante shared cinematic universe. Like in Gremlins 1, you see the little smiley face sticker that you see all over in The Howling, and then also the same news anchor, I think is Lou something, was in it as well. So he was really trying to do a thing, like, because if I remember correctly, Roger Corman had a couple films that connected like fictional characters as well, and I think that Dante was trying to do something similar.
Not everything's a shared universe. They didn't really do that back then. It was just sort of like, hey, here's a reference to that. Like, sure. Oh, if you like this, here's a thing that was in the background of that other thing, and there you can go, references. People like Easter eggs like that. So maybe it was trying to tie it in, or maybe it was just like, this isn't a universe. This is just a joke. Right. This is just a reference. I think that happened a lot more back then. Now everything's got to be a universe. Kevin Smith can't just be like, that's a burger from movies, and that's a reference to Clerks too. It's like, no, this is part of the Clerks universe. It's like, all right,
it's part of the Tusk shared universe. Oh no.
Why would you bring that up?
Anchor Lou Landers, played by Jim Merkel.
Did Galligan work at all after Gremlins 2? That's what I want to know.
He was in an episode of Star Trek Voyager with Richard Ricardo. So there you go.
Oh, he did a lot of stuff, huh?
Just nothing that we would see.
Nothing good, but
I mean, yeah. And even Phoebe Cates didn't really do a ton after this.
Well, that was back when a woman turned 30. Hollywood had no more use for her, so that's kind of just what happens there.
Even though she looks exactly the same today as she did in Gremlins.
What do you say about Joe Dante? The guy made some goofy ass movies that a lot of people like most of, right? Like, who doesn't like The Burbs? But like, what did he do in The Burbs that, like, as a director was groundbreaking? Like, his contribution to The Burbs was the fact that, like, he got someone to help him write a funny movie, so he could direct it. And, The Burbs was great and everyone loved it, but, like, did he do anything with his camera that was groundbreaking? It was just sort of like, he knew how to shoot movies like The Burbs, and it was really funny. And nobody really made a ton of movies. Well, I guess every movie Tom Hanks was in the 1980s was exactly like The Burbs, but
yeah.
Did he have a groundbreaking cinematic style? Like, he's more of a filmmaker than like cinematographer. Sure. I think directors have two jobs. There's the filmmaker, there's the, I got this written, or I wrote it, or, my friend wrote it, and then, or I found a book I liked or whatever, and then I got the money for this, And then, this is the kind of movie I want to make tonally versus like I know my lenses. I think that's two jobs that a director has. And as a cinematographer, there's not much you can say about Joe Dante. I'm sure some people that know a lot more about cinema than me can pick some stuff out and be like, you're wrong because here's a technique. But there's not a ton that I observed in rewatching all of his movies. So really all we just want to talk about is how much he liked the stuff he made, I guess.
You can say that a Joe Dante protagonist is kind of the same in all of his films. He loves the skeptic who experiences something extraordinary, or he comes across like an extraordinary like entity or being, and then and then that skeptic has to convince the others to kind of jump on board. He did that with, Tom Hanks in The Burbs, Gremlins, of course, Small Soldiers. The kid had some real problems, and no one was going to believe him right off the bat.
I like that nobody believes the person.
Yeah.
And then they kind of get to watch other people get eaten by gremlins. And they're like, why didn't I believe there were gremlins? He's like, I should have listened to me about the gremlins. I kind of like that trope. And he used that quite a bit.
Yeah, it's like throughout. There's a couple of things that we could talk about visually. I think that, again, just he knows how to make a dollar look like $5. He's always had.
That's a Roger Corman tech.
Yeah.
Like growing up with interning for a guy who just was the master,
Mm-hmm.
There were a few people that were really doing a good job of. There's like, hey, if you hollow out a watermelon and fill it full of gauze with fake blood, you can look like a car ran over someone's head for $8. And I think there's something to be said for that. Corman just, I don't know, man. What was the budget on Death Race 2000? Like $50, and that movie easily looked like it was made for a budget of $150. Like,
right.
So, yeah. I think that's an excellent point that you just made.
Well, I mean,
I took credit for.
Gremlins, it was a ton of work. It was a ton of work to do those puppets. And even though, like I said earlier, some of it looked real shoddy, I mean, there was still some love involved in making those things look as terrifying and interactive as they did. Even like Small Soldiers, it didn't have the biggest budget, but it was, again, still in 1998, it was pushing the limits of what could be done. And then I think that he also utilizes spaces really well. Like, he cuts a lot. Like, it's almost at a frantic pace. And I think that has to do with coming off as like a cartoonish style, right? Like a cartoon or a comedy, you're supposed to be jump cutting around all over the place to kind of keep it going and keep this freneticness about the film. And I think that he does just that, and he utilizes every corner of every room, and even something as like a bigger platform as like the town in Gremlins or the big skyscraper in Gremlins 2. That thing's like a honeycomb. Like, we're in and out of places and in corners and in nooks and crannies and in like overhead storage bins, and he gets right up in everything, and he uses spaces really well. So that's some things. He worked with fantastic creature effects artists like Rick Baker and Rob Bottin. He found these two kind of early, like Rick Baker was already kind of established by this point, but Rob Bottin, he was a student from Rick Baker, and he's made some of the best creature effects in cinema.
Something to be said for people that did practical effects. Like, I think Hollywood's coming back around to that. Because I think there's just like, we're getting to a sort of uncanny valley thing. Like, the Incredible Hulk looks weird as shit in the Avengers movies. He just doesn't look right. And, as much mocap as you can do and, get every Andy Serkis to look like anything you want, there is something to be said for practical effects. And I think they had it right in the 80s when they were doing that a lot.
Because what's really next? Okay, so we've de-aged people. We're now going to bring James Dean back from the dead and cast, dead people. As far as CG, like, water looks photorealistic. Okay, so what's next? Now it's the tactical puppets are back. There's gonna be a Gremlins 3. There's gonna be, there's the Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, which was fantastic. But you're right. It's now we've come full circle, and it's tactile and not special, not CG is cool again.
I think as soon as CGI James Dean is in a movie, I think there's going to be a real backlash.
That's the line, right?
Well, honestly, I didn't really like CGI Carrie Fisher.
Or was it Peter Cushing and as
Peter
Grand Moff
Cushing
Tarkin?
either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Technically, it was great, but it just was very off-putting.
I could be wrong about this, and maybe just Marilyn Monroe's going to be doing a Pepsi commercial soon. Everyone's going to be super fine with it, but like I really don't like it. And I think it's possible we're going to go back to more practical effects, and that's cool.
Yeah.
You know, people used to make models. Remember that?
And matte paintings.
Yeah, not everybody was on a green screen staring at a tennis ball, kids. You know, back in a dark time called the 80s and 90s, people just made models of stuff. And it's not like you're like, oh, we got to get back to Ray Harryhausen because that stuff looks awful now, too. Right. You know, just because it's not that it wasn't great for the time, but like stop motion animation looks like stop motion animation.
Mm-hmm. It's why I found something like The Greatest Showman so charming, is because they did those old Hollywood tricks. They did big sets and matte paintings, and I'm like, this is way more charming than I think it should be, and this works because it feels of the time, and it feels like those films, like Joe Dante films, they have a soul to them, and it's not just some nerd in a room clicking buttons making, you know, reanimating Carrie Fisher and creeping us all out. It's actually someone taking the time to paint something with a paintbrush. And I know, God, we sound so like archaic, but it's just like they had one werewolf in The Howling, but he actually cut together the film to make it look like they had a whole town's full of werewolves. And he employed some of the same techniques with the Gremlins too. It's just like it's so much more of a pain in the ass to do it this way, but it's you got to see things happen for the first time, and there's something to be said about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So unfortunately, like, people aren't rushing out to go see a Joe Dante film now. Like The Hole and Burying the Axe, it's not as can't miss, and it kind of does feel a little soulless nowadays. So I think his best films are behind him, but the films that he did put out, I mean, it's hard to deny that he didn't make some of the most important films of our generation.
I just don't think he's into it anymore, you know, because I think it's a real pain in the ass for Joe Dante to get a movie made these days. And if you want to make horror, like, there aren't a ton of good horror movies, and when there is a good one, it's a huge deal. And that's like somebody that, like, okay, this is what I was always going to make, you know. Someone like Robert Eggers comes along and makes something crazy. So, you know, the fact that, like, it's either torture porn or jump scares in horror nowadays, and, you know, even the stuff that's, like, considered really good, like The Babadook or It Follows, even that's a little bit off. So for Joe Dante to be like, hey, remember me, I did Gremlins. Again, I'm just guessing what he sounds like.
That's closer. That was closer.
I'm from Philly.
He's from Jersey.
Well, he went to school in Philly, so whatever. I'm sure he claims the Philadelphia. I don't know, man. Just a recurring theme on this show. If you've never seen us before, we don't know what people from Philadelphia sound like.
They say sausage and peppers.
Sausage and peppers.
I think he's moved past it like a Cronenberg at this point. He's not going to be like Soderbergh, right? He's not going to like try to reinvent the wheel and just be like, I'm just going to shoot all this on my galaxy.
Exactly.
He does.
Joe Dante's not like, screw it, I'm going to shoot the Gremlins 3 on my iPhone.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: if he were like making, you know, inner space tier stuff, and just Hollywood had passed him by, that'd be one thing. He'd be like, people don't want Joe Dante's no more. But, like, he's not making good movies. And maybe that's because no one's giving him scripts for good movies. But, like, if you're like, hey, who's got a good script? I'm Joe Dante. I'll get the thing made. I feel like he could potentially make something good, and he's not. So either he's, like, not into it, or he just doesn't know how to do it anymore. Because, like, people are making movies in Hollywood. Shit's happening. You know, new people are coming along and wowing people. A24 makes every movie is good. So the fact that The Hole was just a piece of shit, and there's no nice way to say that.
Right.
The Hole sucked, and everyone was like, "Oh, okay, well, he made Looney Tunes and then took 5 years off and made a bunch of forgettable TV shows. Now he's back, and I expected more. So if he took 5 years prepping to make a piece of shit, like maybe he just either doesn't want to and he's making movies for a paycheck, or it's too much effort to make the kind of movie he feels like he wants to make. Because I don't think it's a case of like, oh, Hollywood doesn't want to make, you couldn't make Gremlins today, because you could make Gremlins today.
Right.
I think people make dumb, silly shit all the time and people like it. I wish he could make something that made him happy as making Gremlins or The Burbs made him, But if he's content to just direct television, that's fine too. He's earned it. He's made a lot of good movies. For a guy who has like about a dozen credits, like 6 of those movies are absolute monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you subtract Joe Dante from the CinemaScape, like it gets way worse. So we're never gonna get another The Howling, I guess. But to make the kind of horror movies that people are making now, you couldn't make them funny, because I don't think people want that. Right.
I think you said it perfectly. The movies that he's only interested in the movies that he wants to make, and he said that he's had a bunch of dream projects that are just never going to happen, because there is a platform for the movies he would be good at making now. And arguably, I think that tell me if Burying the X or The Hole wasn't straight to VOD. In my mind, it would have elevated the movie, because it wouldn't have been trying to be something it's not. But he's just like, I'm Joe fucking Dante, and I'm not gonna just go straight to Netflix, where Soderbergh's just like, yeah, I'll cash Amazon's paycheck all day. I don't, I don't care about that.
Yeah, because Soderbergh's like, oh my God, I just found an end run around The Hassle, and Dante's like, The Hassle is the work.
Yeah.
I think he could still make good movies, but I don't think he can navigate Hollywood.
Right.
Because he's trying to navigate 1980s Hollywood, where he was a wunderkind, right? Like right out of film school. Still in film school, he made a decent documentary, and then he, got to co-make Hollywood Boulevard. Corman takes him on, Spielberg takes him. Like he was it. Yep. He had a fantastic career, and when it started to slow down, he just did some TV. I just don't think he knows how to navigate Hollywood anymore, because every executive wasn't alive when he made Gremlins. Every person that's telling him no on the shit he wants to do was not alive when he made The Twilight Zone. So the Hollywood that he knows how to navigate isn't there anymore. And I feel like, why would you want to reinvent the wheel when you have enough money to just like, man, I'll direct an episode of the shitty MacGyver show and, cash that check, and, oh, it's Christmas time. Everyone's playing, TNT's playing a Gremlins marathon. That'll put an extension on my deck. I don't think he wants to make the kind of movies he doesn't want to make, because he doesn't have to do anything.
Right. Like a Cronenberg. And it's, yeah, like you said, it's movie execs from that era grew up in that culture, where now it's just like the CEO of Paramount Pictures is probably like the ex-CEO of the Sharper Image. It's just like, who cares? Like, they're just people now. They're just businessmen, and they're just looking at spreadsheets.
Hollywood's their product.
Right.
It's like, I can sell clip-on ties. I can sell a film. Yeah.
And Soderbergh's right there, like waiting in the wings, just like, I'll do it on the iPhone.
It's a cynical look at Hollywood, but at the same time, like, that's kind of the reality of it. There's a small number, and if they all pass on your project, then it's Hollywood or nothing.
Right.
Nobody's willing to be Kevin Smith these days.
Yeah, where Dante's just like, it took like 3 months to get that vegetable gremlin right for that, 5 seconds in the scene. And it's just like,
I know, some 950 man hours
just
went into the sexy gremlin that all the other gremlins got horny for.
Yeah, just the gag. Or even Richard Picardo was like, okay, I wouldn't, but I would. Yeah. Once you reach that pinnacle of the thing that you do, I'm sure that you, not so much ego, but you're just like, yeah, I achieved this. How am I just not walking into anything and just giving carte blanche to now? I've worked so hard all my life, and now I want to do the passion pieces I want to do, and Hollywood's just like, no, they won't let them in the door. So that's kind of tragic, but it is just the way of the gun at this point, and I'm happy for what we got from him, and I could say I'm not really interested to see anything else he could do.
I'll give him a chance. I'll always give him a chance. But yeah, imagine if he never made a movie after Small Soldiers. Like, everybody be like, when is Joe Dante going to make another movie?
Yeah.
You know, maybe he go out on top.
And then he gave us Looney Tunes. Oof.
Well, he wanted to make Looney Tunes. You know? Remember when everyone thought, it's like, you know what'll save this picture? Brendan Fraser. Remember those days? Hollywood's tough for Brendan Fraser, I guess.
Life is tough for Brendan Fraser.
He made a comeback. There's been a Fraser reconnaissance. Fraser Renaissance?
Yeah.
It's like the Matthew McConaughey Renaissance, but for Brendan Fraser. The Fraser reconnaissance.
Oh. So that is our show on Joe Dante, legendary filmmaker. If you like this, go ahead and click that thumbs up button. Share it around. Tell people that this is a show, because we put a lot into this, and it's a ton of fun. It's, you know, it's not the easiest thing to find things on the YouTubes these days. So if you like this, like I said, sharing is caring, and tell people that we exist. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You could follow me on Twitter at OrzovDunn. Thank you for my co-host, Jason Alt. Where can everyone find you?
I am Jason E. Alt on the Twitter, and if you look there, the pinned post at the top of my profile has all the links to all the other things I do. I'm very busy around the internet, and I would just like to personally thank each and every one of you. Thank you. All three of you for watching this episode.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll see you next time.